faces a new challenge. Shania, thank you, brother. Facing a challenge now from Esau. We saw in chapter 32 the preparations that were made, how that he saw this vision of God at Mahanaim, that he sent messengers to Esau to let him know he was coming back and be respectful. And he found out that Esau was going to meet him with 400 soldiers. So he divided up his camp into two companies. He prays this great prayer to God in chapter 32. And then he begins to send these gifts, one after another, these troops of gifts, 3 waves of gifts, hundreds of animals he sends over as a peace offering. And then, of course, this very curious picture at the end of chapter 32 where he wrestles with an angel and prevails to get a blessing at a place that becomes known as Penuel, the face of God. But now in chapter 33, as Esau approaches, we find that Jacob divides his family into the children of the handmaids, and then of Leah, and then of Rachel, in certain order, with Rachel being the hindmost. And then he himself passes over before all, and he meets Esau. And the meeting is not what he feared. It's better than what he could have hoped for. Esau ran to meet him, verse 4, and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Whose are these? This is my family that God has blessed me with. And he introduces them to the children of the handmaids and of Leah and of Rachel. What's all this drove? All these animals you've sent my way? He said, this is that I might find grace in your sight. And Esau said, I have enough. Keep it, my brother. And Jacob said, no, I have enough. But I have seen your face as though it had been the face of God, verse 10, and thou wast pleased with me. I don't think that's intended in any way to be profane, but I think very much so Jacob sees this as being mercy from God, that his brother who was bent on killing him has been willing to forgive. And he is more than pleased to offer this as an offering on this occasion in the spirit of forgiveness and reconciliation. And then Esau says to him, well, let's journey together. And I think for a variety of reasons that was not the way to go. The reasons that Jacob camps on, I think, are polite reasons and true. As far as they go, he said, we travel at 2 different paces. Even though he's now got several hundred animals to take, he doesn't have all the young ones that Jacob has, plus the children, the young people that he has. And so he says, you go ahead. And I will come to you at Mount Seir in verse 14. That's a question that's been raised by people through the years thinking about that expression. What does he mean by that? If he ever went to Mount Seir, we don't have a record of it. I'm not saying he didn't go. Mount Seir, you remember, that's that territory down, if you're looking at the map in your mind, south of the Dead Sea. That's where they settled. That was the land of Edom. But whether he planned to go and he changed his mind, he did go and it's not recorded. At any rate, there's no indication that he ever went there. Esau says then, well, let me leave some men with you. You know, obviously you have some vulnerabilities. And he said, there's no need for that. I think that's an expression of faith in God. It's the Lord, the higher protection, that will protect him. And so after this very congenial meeting in verse 16, Esau returned that day on his way to Mount Seir. They will see each other again, at least one more time. But for now, Jacob stays behind. And as he said, he plans to come slowly back toward the land of promise. He journeyed to a place that became known as Sukkoth. Sukkoth means booths or shelters. And it's evident from the text, I don't have details any more than you do, but he built a house there. and that he built shelters, not just out in the open, but places where the animals could be protected. He planned to be there for some time, and he was there for some unspecified time. But then eventually he made his way over the Jordan to a place we know as Shechem. And he bought a piece of ground there where he spread his tent. At the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. And he erected an altar there. There'd be a lot of altars that'd be erected there through the years. Shechem is a very old town, an old town of the Bible story. But he calls the name of this altar El-Elohe-Israel, which is to say God, the God of Israel. He is Israel. So, he's now across the Jordan in Shechem, and that brings us to the story in chapter 34, a memorable story about the defilement of the only daughter that we know of that he had, and that is Dinah. Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, one of these local Canaanites, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her. Now, it's interesting to me to read after smart people, many of whom suggest that perhaps this is a mutual relationship. But I just have to say that never has occurred to me. Now, they make their case for that. But the language just does not seem to suggest that to me. It seems that she is taken. The word defiled is not a word that you'd use necessarily to describe some sort of a mutual relationship. It's the word that's used in other places for afflict or force. It's the same word I think used in reference to Amnon and Tamar. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Yeah. So that seems to me to be the most reasonable explanation for what's going on. But he, unlike Amnon, who just then after he had raped his sister, put her out, he's taken with Dinah, and he desires to have a marriage relationship with her. That doesn't make him a good guy, but that's just what happens. So he says to his father, you need to get this woman for me for a wife. Well, verse 5 says, Jacob heard about all this and what happened to Dinah, but there's no record of him saying or doing anything about it at this time. Jacob's sons, they come back, and Hamor, the father of Shechem, goes to meet with him and talk with him about the matter. And the sons of Jacob came out of the field, verse 7, and they were grieved and very angry because he had wrought this folly in Israel, lying with Jacob's daughter, which thing ought not to be done. And Hamor has a plan. He has a proposal. He says, my son's just crazy about that girl, and I pray you'd give her to him as a wife, and let's just make marriages, and let's just intermarry your tribe with our folks. Take our children, we'll take your children. Dwell with us, find you a place in the land, and we'll just throw together in common. Shechem said unto her father and to the brethren, let me find grace in your sight. And whatever you say to me, I'll give it. Never so much dowry and gift. Whatever you ask, as much as you ask. Just let me have her for my wife. Now the sons of Jacob, verse 13, answered deceitfully. They answered misleadingly, treacherously. A lot of that run in this family, isn't there? Jacob has a history of that, doesn't he? In times past. So, they're angry, but they hide it, and they say, well, this doesn't sound bad, but it can't work because you all are uncircumcised. And it just wouldn't do for us to intermarry and to join forces with uncircumcised people. So, if you consent to be circumcised, every male among you, then we'll go for it. And we will consent to this marriage. If not, then we're just going to take her and be gone. If you will, we will, verse 16, dwell with you and we will become one people. By the way, just as a plan, would that have pleased God? Not at all. Obviously, that's not the plan. The plan is for Israel to be separate from these people and to be distinct. That's not the plan of Hamor and Shechem, and it's certainly not God's plan either. So, verse 18 says the words pleased Hamor and Shechem. They just got to talk everybody else into it. So, the young man deferred not to do this thing. He was so infatuated with Dinah. Any price he would pay. So Hamor and Shechem come back and commune with them into the city and try to talk them into this deal. And how they do that is by saying, look, these people, talking about Jacob's family, they're peaceable with us, verse 21. Let them dwell in the land and trade. It's large enough, we got room for them. And willing to marry with them. And verse 23, this is key, isn't it? Shall not their cattle and their substance and every beast of theirs be ours? Only let us consent unto them. So they settle on the basis of, look, these are rich people. We'll be tied in with a rich family. It will be a good business deal. So, verse 24 says, Hamor and Shechem and all the men of the city agreed, and every male, verse 24, was circumcised, all that went out of the gate of the city. Every male submitted to the rite of circumcision. But there's another plan that they don't see. Verse 25 says, it came to pass on the third day, while they were sore, most vulnerable, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each of them his sword and came upon the city boldly and slew every male. They slew Hamor. They slew Shechem, his son, with the edge of the sword, took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went out. Now that wasn't enough. After having slaughtered all these men who were not able to defend themselves properly, then he spoiled the city because they had defiled their sister. They took their sheep and their oxen and their asses. They took all their wealth, verse 29. They took all their little ones and their wives captive. They spoiled even all that was in the house. That's quite a reaction, is it not, to what happened there? Is that justice? That every man in the whole town is slaughtered and everybody's taken slaves? Well, Jacob didn't think so. And he said to Levi and to Simeon, he said, you trouble me and make me to stink among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites, I being few in number. They'll gather against me and destroy me and destroy the house. Their only reaction to that was, should he deal with our sister as with a harlot? Now again, we don't have any sympathy with what happened to Dinah. But years later, over in Genesis 49, when Jacob pronounces these prophetic blessings or curses, however you'll look at them, upon his sons, he remembers this event that happened all those years earlier. This is 49:5. Simeon and Levi are brethren. Instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. O my soul, come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly. Mine honor, be not thou united. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they digged down a wall. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. And I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. And of course that's what happened, isn't it? Simeon really was absorbed into Judah later on when the territories were allotted. And what happened to Levi? Where was Levi's territory? All over the city. The Levitical cities were scattered. All that goes back to this event that was taken up in prophecy. So, a significant event. But you can see already here, and we've seen it to this point, Jacob's family has a lawless aspect to it, doesn't it? Out of control. Maybe too much influenced by the Canaanites that in whose land they now dwell. Chapter 35 involves the journey of Jacob south. You know, he's up there in the north country in Shechem. But God says to him in chapter 35, go to Bethel and dwell there. Make an altar to the God that appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. It's been nearly 30 years since he had been through Bethel, and God appeared to him there in that unforgettable way. And what did he vow? He vowed, I'll come back here and worship you. Well, God says the time is now. And so Jacob is going to be heading south and on the way go to Bethel. Before he goes to Bethel for this communion with God, he sort of reseizes the reins of leadership in his family, spiritual leadership, by charging his family, verse 2, to put away the strange gods that are among you and be clean and change your garments. Isn't that interesting? To be ceremonially clean and to put away the idols. They were worshiping idols, or at least they had possession of those idols. We're going to Bethel. We're going to build an altar to God. And so verse 4 says, they gave unto Jacob all these strange gods. What did he do with them? He took them and he buried them under a great oak tree or terebinth tree, whatever translation you have there, in Shechem. He didn't do that to come back and get them later. He did that to say, in effect, these are gone forever. But the fact that they had them is really something, isn't it? Rachel stole the gods of her father when she left. So idolatry is still an annoyingly a real presence in all of this. Verse 5, as they journeyed, now they're making their way, he says, go up to Bethel, verse 3. You see here, here's Shechem and here's Bethel. Go up to Bethel. They're going down, but they're going south, but they're going up because Bethel, I don't know, it's 20 miles or so south of there, but it's about 1,000 feet higher in elevation. So they're going up in a sense, though they're going south. And so they're heading toward Shechem. And as they do leave Shechem and head toward Bethel, verse 5 says that nobody pursued them and nobody attacked them. What was Jacob scared of? When he talked to Simeon and Levi, he said, you going to bring this whole people on me? Now, let's be fair. Why did nobody attack them? Nobody pursued them. That's it. He didn't say they didn't want to, but they didn't because God was with them. That's exactly right. So he comes to Luz, to Bethel. He builds the altar there, El Bethel, God of the house of God. And it's there that Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died. Rebekah's nurse is mentioned but not named earlier. Now she is named. How she came there, what's happened to Rebekah? Does this certainly not suggest maybe Rebekah has died? There's no mention of her or her death. We know she was buried at Machpelah. But anyway, this woman is now with Jacob and his family. And it must have been that they had, again, this is reading between the lines, there was a close relationship between these two. Because when they buried her, they called the name of that place the Oak of Weeping. She was much missed. So, he accounts then in verse 9, beginning a little bit of retelling of the history of God calling Jacob from Padan Aram, changing his name to Israel, promising him in verse 11 and 12 that he would receive the land and he would be fruitful, and God would keep with him the promise he had made to Abraham. But it was there that Jacob set up a pillar, verse 14, poured out a drink offering and oil upon that place. And he called upon the name of God in this place, the house of God. He had received a message from God so many years before. They continued to make their way south from Bethel on to a place called Ephrath, which we know better perhaps as Bethlehem, a famous place. And we learn in the story here for the first time that Rachel, the beloved Rachel, is actually expecting a child. She's very far along, and she's in a dangerous situation. In fact, as we know the story, she will die in childbirth. Now, the child will be born and will survive, but her life will be lost in childbirth. When the son was born, she named him Ben-Oni. Anybody remember what that means? Ben-Oni? Son of my sorrow. And I don't think it sounds almost disrespectful, but Jacob says, no, we're not going to call him son of my sorrow. Maybe he had some good noble reasons for that. Maybe he didn't want him to be saddled with this event the rest of his life. But I think he also wanted this to be seen as this is not a failure. His beloved wife is gone, but she has birthed a child that will do her credit, and he calls him Benjamin, which is the son of my right hand, son of my strength. And so this event happened here, and she was buried near Bethlehem, which will be better known later on in the story for other reasons, as you know. He tells us about something else. We don't know exactly where this area beyond the Tower of Adar is. Maybe that's actually a place name itself. There's a reference over in Micah to a place very much of this name, and that place was near Jerusalem, as Bethlehem is. So maybe it was in that same area that something awful and distasteful happened. Reuben. Who's Reuben? Firstborn, but not a noble man. Reuben takes his father's concubine Bilhah in a sexual relationship with her. Again, nothing else is mentioned here, but there's a reference in 1 Chronicles 5 that says this is the main reason why he was passed over when it came to the birthright. Not him, though he was the firstborn. And of course, it will come up when Jacob blesses and curses his sons about his instability. Why did he do this? There's no other information given here, but it certainly sounds like a power play. That maybe he's trying to, like the kings would, take some royal wife in order to advance himself above his father. I don't know. But at any rate, he does something wicked here, and it is remembered in Scripture. And then he goes through again. Now we have the 12 sons, don't we? We got Benjamin now. So he's the last of the 12. So we have these 12 sons now. The sons of Leah and Rachel and Bilhah and Zilpah are mentioned. And then finally, Jacob makes it to his destination, which is in Mamre. That's where Abraham settled all those years before. This is the old home place, the burial place of Abraham and Sarah and so on. And he sees his father again. How many times he had seen him, if he had seen him at all, we don't know. But now he reunites with his father, Isaac. And the last word on Isaac is given here. Isaac lived to be 180 years old. People lived a long time at this time. Not as long as they did during the days prior to Noah, but they lived a long time. But they died in their time. And Isaac gave up the ghost, and Esau and Jacob buried him. It's a great picture of these two men who have long since reconciled, coming together to bury their old father. And so the scene will now shift on to Jacob and to Joseph. Before we focus there, chapter 36, and we'll just say a word about this. I didn't give you any of that, did I? Chapter 36 is the generations of Esau. And all that we'll choose to say about this is it seems evident when you read this story that Esau did become leader of quite a tribe, didn't he? That's what God said. He promised he would. So this is the fulfillment of God's promise. But it's not through Esau the Messiah comes, and this is not where the text focuses. But we do find a couple of things. One is that there's a tightly organized nature to these people. Dukes, which seem to be tribal leaders, and then kings, which seem to be more localized kings, living in their own cities, not necessarily at this time one king over the whole of the people. But they are mentioned here in some detail. This is not a fairy tale, this is history. But chapter 37, we want to get to tonight and begin our study of the story of Joseph as our time is coming to a close. Chapter 37 tells us that Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. I always thought 43 of the last chapter and the first one of this chapter are intended to be linked together. Where did Esau dwell, according to 43? Well, the land of their possession. And where was that? Mount Seir. Edom, as we call it. But not Jacob. Where does Jacob dwell? In the promised land. In the promised land. That's really significant, though it's just, of course we know that, but that's important. God is working to fulfill His promise, His providence. We can see that rolling out like a great carpet here. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, 17 years old, and yet he was the favored son of his father. He had those 10 older brothers, but we've already seen something of their nature. Those guys had some problems. But Jacob was the son of his father's Joseph was the son of his father's old age, but he was also, I think, favored not just for that, but because of his character. He was the responsible one. And he was willing to risk whatever brickbats would come his way to report when his brothers were doing evil. That's what he says in verse 2, that he brought to their father their evil report. He didn't lie about them. We don't know exactly what it was. Maybe they were not treating the animals right. Maybe there was some other moral problem. But his father knew that he would tell the truth. He was reliable, honorable, and mature beyond his years. 17 years old. His father loved him more than his brothers, couldn't help it, and gave him the famous coat of many colors. Some of the translations suggest that the proper translation is a coat with long sleeves, as most people use tunics. I don't know. It's coat of many colors as long as I can remember, so that's the image that comes to my mind anyway. It was distinctive. It was a gift to suggest his special love for his son. But I tell you, that did not win him friends among the rest of his brethren. When they saw all of this, they hated him, verse 4, and could not speak peaceably unto him. And it gets worse. Joseph was given dreams that he recognized were of a supernatural nature. And because he considered them to be messages from beyond, he didn't feel right about keeping them to himself, though I'm sure he was not unaware of maybe how they'd be received. One of them was, he said, we're out in the field binding these sheaves together. You know what a sheave is? Where you tie up the grain, out of the shock. And so here they are working the field, and all of the brothers' sheaves bow down to his. And the brothers, of course, weren't silly. They recognized what that was saying. He said, you think we're all going to bow down to you? You're going to reign over us? Oh, they hated him, even the more for his dreams. He had another dream, verse 9. This was a dream about 11 stars. Wonder who that could be. And the sun and the moon all bowing down to him. He told that his father was there. And the father said, am I the son in this picture? Am I going to bow down to you? And of course, they hated him. Oh, they hated him. His brethren envied him. Who does this remind you of? Envying and hating your brother. Have we seen this before? Does it sound like Cain to you? And Abel? Just, we got a lot more Cains in the picture here. His brethren hated him, envied him, but his father observed the saying. He didn't like what was being said, but he didn't dismiss it either. So, verse 12 says that the brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. That's a long way from Mamre. I don't know. He did buy a piece of land up there. Maybe that's why they went up there. But anyway, that's where they are. And the father sends Joseph up there. Now, verse 14 puts it this way. Go, I pray you, and see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. Is that about what your translation says? I can't help, all through the years, I have sort of read that, and I've read it something like this. Go up there and snoop on those guys and find out what kind of meanness they're in. But that's not really what he said, and maybe that's not what he meant. Now, maybe that was underlying there. I know I can't quite trust these guys, and so I want you to tell me what's going on. But by his words, what did he tell Joseph to go do? See if they're okay. They're way up there. I want them to know I'm thinking about them. And maybe that's all that was meant. Maybe that was his intention, to sort of help calm the waters. Find out if there's something they need that I can send them, so on. But anyway, he's on this mission now, again, from his father, to go and see his brothers. So he's heading up there. He gets to Shechem, and they're not there. And he's looking around for them, and somebody finds him and says, who are you looking for? I'm looking for these guys. I heard them say they're going to Dothan. So he went on to Dothan. This map is impossibly small. I apologize. Here's around, Hebron, and then here is Shechem. Way up here at the top is Dothan. So another 10, 15 miles north. And as he goes to meet them, they see him afar off. I've always thought maybe it was that coat that gave him away, He's coming with that coat, and I said, oh, that guy. He's up here. That's not good news. And I tell you what they did. They conspired to slay him. I mean, it's terrible enough to be envious, and they let that build into bitterness and hatred, and now they're openly talking about murdering him. By the way, that's how it works. When you let the devil in, let him come get his feet up off the ground, sit in the easy chair, and take residence in your mind and your heart, you might be amazed at what you're capable of. Things you never dreamed of. So this is just Cain all over again. What did God tell Cain? If you don't fly right and put your temper in the right place, it will own you. It will rule you. And that's exactly what happens here. So, they conspire. And they say to one another, and this is just that bitterness coming out, behold, this dreamer cometh. Anybody have another translation of dreamer in verse 19? Yeah, master, Lord of dreams, literally. Here's that old Lord of dreams coming again. Mr. Dreamer. Let's just kill him and throw him in a pit somewhere, his body in a pit somewhere. We'll see what comes of those dreams of his. Reuben, our man Reuben, who's got a spotty reputation. But Reuben has no stomach for this. So he says, well, listen, let's not kill him. Let's shed no blood. Let's just put him in a pit somewhere and just let nature take him, But really he had another plan. He planned when he got an opportunity to rescue him out of that pit and get him back to his father. The other brothers didn't know about that. But when they get a hold of him, that's what they do. They strip him of his clothes, and they throw him in a pit that had no water in it, dry hole. And verse 25 says they just sat down to eat. And that's about all that's said about it. Later on in the story, where is it? It's over in chapter 42, I think it is. When they're talking among themselves, they're standing now before Joseph's judgment. They don't know who that is. They are condemning themselves, kicking themselves, saying, we brought this on ourselves. We saw, this is verse 21 of chapter 42, we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear it. You can imagine Joseph crying out to his brothers. They're eating and they're hard-headed and hard-hearted. Well, while this is going on, guess who shows up? A company of Ishmaelites coming down the road, and apparently Midianites with them. They're both are mentioned. And Judah says, hey, I got an idea. Why don't we sell him? After all, what's the profit in just killing him? We can get some money for him. And after all, he is our brother. That's interesting, isn't it? And our flesh, verse 27. So, two reasons why they decided to sell Joseph. And so they drew him out of the pit and they sold him, verse 28, for 20 pieces of silver. 20 pieces of silver, which, from what I've read, was about the going rate for a slave. It wasn't a discount. It wasn't exaggerated. It was just about the rate at that time. Now, Reuben wasn't there when this was going on. I don't know where he was. When he got back and saw that pit empty, he absolutely caved in. He tore his clothes and he said, where shall I go? The child is not. What am I going to say? He knew as the eldest, his father would be looking him up first to say, where is Joseph? Well, I guess he could have chased after this caravan, but they're on camels. He can't catch them. And if he can, what's he going to do? He can't buy them back. He didn't have that money. And nobody else cares to buy him back. So what he does is not good. He decides to take the easy road and just go along with the deceit. So they take the coat, the distinctive coat of Joseph. They kill a goat. And they smear the coat with the blood. And they take it to the father. And they say, now we don't know whose coat this is. We found it. It's covered with this blood. Is this your son's coat? They knew exactly whose coat that was. And they also must have known how this would affect the father. The hypocrisy and the hard-heartedness of these brothers just takes your breath away. Verse 33, he knew it. And he says, my son's coat, an evil beast has devoured him. Without doubt, he's torn in pieces somewhere. Pieces of him left out in the woods. And Jacob tore his clothes. And he put sackcloth upon his loins. And he mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters. By the way, I used to wonder about that, daughters, plural. If there were other daughters, they're not mentioned. Maybe this includes daughters-in-law. That seems to be likely. But his family rises up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, I will go down to the grave unto my son in mourning. And thus his father wept for him. But here's the thing. Jacob said, no doubt he's torn in pieces. He's in the grave. Where was he? Next verse tells us. On his way to Egypt. Yeah, on his way to Egypt. It's always been a great example. You know, people sometimes will tell you, I feel this in my heart. I know this is so. You can be wrong about a feeling if all I've got is a feeling. You know, feelings can be misinformed. You can't be more sincere than he was. Well, I believe God, if you're sincere, that's all that counts. He was sincere. He was sincerely wrong. You know, truth matters. Facts matter, not just feelings. If there's ever been a generation of Americans that needs to know that, ours does. This one does. But what the text tells us is that Joseph was on his way to Egypt, where he would be sold to a man named Potiphar, who was an officer of Pharaoh's and a captain of the guard. Anybody know the translation of that verse 36? the bodyguard. Some translate that word executioners. He was a serious guy who worked for the king, who carried a sword and knew how to use it. So, that doesn't sound good, does it? But we'll see how it turns out. Chapter 38, I'm going to mention just in brief. We just have a couple of minutes here. And then next time we'll get heavy into the story of Joseph and his brothers in Egypt. But in chapter 38, I think we see a little glimpse of the dirty laundry of Judah's family and Judah himself. Some people think, well, this is a strange story told out of order, but the first verse tells us it came to pass at that time. The Spirit, I think, intended to show us this story to give us again a picture of the depths to which Joseph's brothers had fallen. Judah marries a Canaanite woman. What did Abraham say? Take my son, don't let him marry a Canaanite. In a couple of generations, that was all forgotten. And then Tamar marries Judah's sons. I say sons, she married two. And both those sons were killed because of their sinful behavior. God struck them down. But Judah got to look at Tamar and thinking she was the problem. He promised her, I will give you my third son to marry when he's old enough. It was an old tradition that was incorporated later in the law of Moses. You would take, if your brother died, you would take his widow, give her a child that might carry his name on. And part of this inheritance would be his. But now, after promising her that she could have the third son, he doesn't give the son to her. So she traps him. She goes down to a public place and pretends to be a prostitute. She's not a prostitute, but she pretends to be one because she knows he will be there, and she knows the kind of man he is. And he hires her and sleeps with her without even knowing who she is. And after doing that, he didn't have the price of the hire, but he did have some things that might be used as sort of a token to make sure that he would pay. So he goes his way, intending to come back with the animal that would be given as a price for her services. She goes back to her father's house where she's been staying, puts back all the garments of widowhood. And 3 months later, she's with child, where she's brought out to be burned. Not going to put up with this kind of immorality. And she says, well, okay, that's fine. And these things belong to the man whom I slept with. And they were Judah's, and he recognized. And he confessed them. And what he said was, she's more righteous than I am. I used to read that, was puzzled by that. I don't think anybody did the right thing here. But the more I thought about this story, I'll just consider with you, the more I've come to recognize that I think in terms of her motives, I don't think she handled this right. There's no defense for what she did. But her motives were to try to raise up seed to her fallen husband. Probably the first one. But Judah didn't care about what was right and did her wrong. She should have gone to the men of the city. She should have found some way to appeal. She took matters into her wisdom. But Judah really comes out looking the worst of all in this story. But she has twins. And one of those twins is named Pharez. And Pharez, believe it or not, is in the lineage of Christ. It's amazing how the story takes twists and turns. But if it had not been for her actions on this occasion, then Judah maybe would not have been in the lineage as he intended to be or was promised to be. God would have worked it out some other way, I'm sure. But this is the way it happened. That to me has always been quite a strange story. But as I said, I think Judah comes out looking the worst in all of it. Next time, I want to look in chapter 39 at the story of Joseph in Potiphar's house. And let's talk about that story Sunday morning as we begin to draw our studies to a close. Thank you so much for your kind attention and your help.